In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 1st, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Oakland versus Youngstown State. Youngstown State is sitting at home on New Year's Day, with the market giving them just a tiny cushion, basically a 1.5-point nudge, which tells you odds makers see these two as pretty close to equals once you strip away the crowd and the comfort of Beasley Center. Oakland shows up with a loud profile for a team that sits at 6-8 overall, piling up more than 82 points per night while also giving up more than 84, playing at a pace that lives comfortably in the fast lane and, by most models, lands in roughly the top third of the country for tempo. That frantic style has been forged against a brutal schedule, opening on the road at Michigan, Purdue, and top-ranked Houston, so when they settle into a Horizon League gym, a one-possession spread does not look all that intimidating for a group that has already survived some serious heavyweight punches. On the other side, Youngstown State's record at 8-6 with a 2-2 mark in the league comes with a very different personality, a team that scores in the high 70s, holds opponents near the low 70s, and lives in that mid to upper 60s pace range where each trip down the floor feels a little more deliberate and a little more controlled. They rebuilt the roster with a huge influx of new faces, 11 newcomers around just a few returning pillars, so there is talent, no doubt, but also the usual chemistry quirks you get when a coach is still figuring out which combinations he trusts when the game gets tight and noisy. That contrast matters because Oakland, with its experienced core of Brody Robinson running the show and a front line of Michael Hooge, Isaac Garrett, and Tuberu Naivalura, has already been through high-leverage spots together and knows how to play comfortably as the villain on the road, while Youngstown is still learning how all these pieces fit when somebody punches back hard in the second half. You can almost picture how this first league meeting of the year could unfold. Oakland wants this to feel like a racetrack, Robinson pushing the ball, Biggs running the floor, using that tempo to turn a short underdog number into a coin flip or even a spot where the favorite starts to feel the pressure of expectations from the home crowd. Youngstown, with its length and a 7-foot anchor in the middle, is built more to control the glass, protect the rim, and force Oakland to win possession after possession in the half court instead of just riding runs, which sounds great in theory, but that also means the Penguins have to execute cleaner for more trips if they want to stretch out any margin at all. In a game where the matchup itself already looks like a tug of war between a tested, cohesive offense and a still gelling roster that leans on structure and home energy, grabbing the points with the side that has faced the nastier schedule and owns the more explosive scoring profile is a very logical way to attack the spread, especially when the number is this tight and home court is doing most of the heavy lifting for the favorite. As our first pick for this matchup, the Oakland Golden Grizzlies to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. On paper, it is easy to see why the total landed there. Oakland games look like scoreboard operators' cardio workout, with the Golden Grizzlies averaging over 82 and allowing more than 84, which puts their typical night in the mid-160s before you factor in situation, travel, and opponent style. Youngstown State, for its part, scores in the high 70s and gives up somewhere in the low 70s, so their baseline lands closer to the low 150s, a noticeably calmer neighborhood compared to the chaos Oakland usually brings along. Here is the thing: when you mash those two worlds together, books hang a total that basically dares you to assume 40 minutes of constant fireworks, but conference games like this, especially early in league play, often nudge toward a slightly more measured feel. Coaches have clean scouting reports, the rotations are deeper, and both sides are hunting for defensive identity as much as offensive rhythm, which becomes even more relevant when both teams are officially listing no injuries and are rolling out full benches. Fresh legs on the perimeter and in the paint mean more contests at the arc, more fouls to give, and more live bodies to absorb contact at the rim, all of which can turn the occasional would-be layup line into a few extra empty trips and some longer, grindier possessions than their raw scoring averages suggest. There is also that subtle New Year conference feel, where whistles tighten a bit, possessions matter more, and even teams that like to run start showing just a bit more selectivity about when they really push, because nobody wants their league opener to turn into an out-of-control track meet that slips away on a couple of bad three-point decisions. Youngstown's home building, with its familiar sight lines and a crowd that usually wakes up more for key defensive stands than for a sixth straight rush jumper, naturally leans into that script, while Oakland, despite its love of pace, has already shown against elite opponents that it can be forced into ugly stretches when met with size, a prepared game plan, and a disciplined defensive rotation. So while both teams absolutely have the firepower to race into the 160s if everything breaks loose, the combination of a very ambitious number, full healthy squads, and conference-level familiarity points more toward a game that flirts with but ultimately falls shy of the projection rather than one that blows straight through it in a clean shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Bradley versus Belmont. New Year's Day in Nashville, MVC play humming along, and you have two very different basketball personalities sharing one floor. Bradley shows up like a reliable work truck, built on toughness, contact, and a defense that actually takes pride in every ugly possession it creates. Belmont at home in the Curb Event Center feels more like the sleek car in the driveway that neighbors keep noticing, built to space the floor, push the pace, and turn a normal Wednesday night game into a shooting show that gets clipped on social. On paper, the contrast is loud. Belmont is pouring in around 85 points per game, winning by roughly 16 on average, and doing it with the kind of shooting numbers that make opposing coaches stare longer than they want to at the film, over 50% from the field and right around 40% from three. They are not simply winning, they are creating separation, and that matters when we start talking about a spread sitting in that mid-single-digit range at home against another respected program. Bradley comes at you in a completely different mood. Their offense lives in the high 70s, their defense holds opponents in the high 60s, and most of their identity is tied to being very hard to score on for a full 40 minutes. The advanced defensive numbers back that up, grading them as clearly better than the national average and landing them in that top 70 neighborhood for defensive efficiency, which is exactly the profile of a team that does not hand you easy points just because your logo looks pretty on a graphic. Here is where it gets interesting if you are thinking about which side covers. The books are hanging Belmont as about a 5.5-point favorite at home, which is the market's way of saying, yes, we respect Bradley, but we trust Belmont's overall quality, offensive ceiling, and home court more. Honestly, that is a fairly modest number for a team that has spent the first stretch of the season blowing out a lot of opponents and treating double-digit wins as routine rather than special occasions. The pace piece leans into that story too, without even talking totals yet. Belmont is playing faster than your average Division 1A team, happy to get into the low 70s in possessions, while Bradley sits a tick slower but still in a range where games do not feel like old-school rock fights. That extra bit of tempo is usually the friend of the favorite, because more trips mean more chances for the better offense to let its shooting and spacing show up over the full sample instead of being trapped in a 20-possession coin flip. Against the spread, the story has a familiar rhythm if you have followed seasons like this before. Bradley has felt a bit shakier for bettors than for fans, with more non-covers than covers so far, the kind of team that wins its fair share of games but sometimes leaves you staring at the box score wondering how a comfortable 8-point win still wound up short of the ticket you needed. Belmont, on the other hand, has hovered much closer to even, not an automatic ATM against the number, but rarely a disaster either, which fits a team that has been priced up as the market gradually recognizes how explosive that offense is. Layer in the situation and the picture sharpens a bit more. You have a New Year's Day home game, a fan base that has plenty of reason to show up and make noise, and a host team that knows its calling card is putting points on the board in a hurry rather than trying to grind out a rock-solid 58-54 kind of win. If this game tilts toward Belmont late, it is very easy to imagine them still hunting good looks and keeping the throttle down rather than simply dribbling the air out of the ball for 4 minutes just to protect a small margin. So when you stack everything together, style, efficiency, the slight pace edge, home court, and the way both teams have treated bettors so far, the side that feels more likely to stretch a close game into a comfortable margin is the one wearing the home whites in that building. Bradley has the defense to be annoying and to hang around, but you get the sense that if this one opens up even a little, the team more equipped to turn that crack into a full gap is the host, not the visitor. As our first pick for this matchup, the Belmont Bruins to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Belmont's typical night is something like 85 scored and about 69 allowed, so their games alone sit in the mid-150s if everyone simply behaves like they normally do. Bradley is not some slow-motion, walk-it-up outfit either. They average in the high 70s on offense and allow almost 70, which drops their own normal box scores into that high 140s to low 150s neighborhood before you even account for facing a fast, efficient offense on the other side. Tempo nudges things along quietly in the background. Both teams are playing a bit quicker than the national midpoint, with Belmont especially comfortable in games that feature plenty of trips up and down the floor rather than an endless parade of half-court wrestling matches. More possessions do not guarantee points, but when those extra possessions are being handled by an offense that ranks in the top 70 nationally in offensive efficiency, the math starts to tilt toward scoreboards getting a workout more often than not. Here is the thing, the styles on both sides are quietly more offense-friendly than they might look if you only glanced at the defensive reputation. Belmont can spread you out, hit from deep, and finish at the rim at a really high clip, so even good defense sometimes just turns into nice contest, better shot possessions. Bradley, while known first for its defense, is no slouch on the other end, with solid shooting and enough guard play to punish a defense that is constantly rotating and chasing shooters around screens. You end up with two groups that rarely look completely lost when they have the ball, which is exactly what you want if you are cheering for points. Game flow scenarios also lean subtly towards scoring rather than stalling. If Belmont gets out in front, Bradley has already shown it can live in faster games, and trailing teams tend to push pace, shoot more threes, and extend the game with fouls in the last minute or two, all of which quietly feed an over. If Bradley lands the early punches and jumps ahead, then you are inviting an aggressive, high-powered Belmont offense to play from behind at home, which usually means more quick shots, fewer long, patient possessions, and very little interest in letting the clock drip away while down on the scoreboard. Honestly, the paths where this stays comfortably below that number require both teams to underdeliver compared to what they have done so far, either through very poor shooting or an unusually whistle-heavy game that kills rhythm without actually stacking free throws. You would need Bradley's defense to completely shove Belmont out of its comfort zone for long stretches, and you would need Belmont's home offense to stop creating the kind of open looks it has been living on since the schedule started, which is not impossible, but it is definitely asking for a lot of things to go wrong at the same time. Given the current scoring, tempo, and efficiency profiles, the more natural script has this turning into a game where both sides get into their preferred actions often enough that the total creeps, and probably sprints, past what the sportsbooks are hanging today. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Hawaii versus UC Riverside. This matchup really has that classic early January feel, the kind where one team looks like it already knows who it is and the other is still trying to figure things out on the fly. Hawaii rolls into Riverside on a 6-game heater with a record of 10-2, sitting at the top of the Big West pecking order and carrying the kind of quiet confidence you only get from stacking wins. UC Riverside, on the other hand, sits at 6-8 with a more uneven story, a couple of bright spots mixed with some very loud wake-up calls, including that recent blowout loss at UCLA that splashed across every scoreboard ticker right before the holidays. Oddsmakers have taken the hint, hanging Hawaii as roughly an 8.5-point road favorite with a projected total in the 150.5 neighborhood as of this recording, which already tells you the market respects the visitors more than the building. Here is the thing, when you peel away the records and the shiny streaks, this is a very clean clash of identities. Hawaii is built on what coaches quietly love. They guard, they rebound, and they stay connected. The numbers back that up. They are holding opponents to just a touch over 63 points per night, which puts them inside the top 15 nationally in scoring defense, and they sit near the top of the Big West in rebounding margin, winning the glass by about 10 boards a game. That is the basketball equivalent of bringing a packed lunch and a hard hat on every trip. UC Riverside leans more to the finesse side. They shoot it well enough from deep in that mid-30% range and can absolutely get hot, but their rebounding numbers are stuck in the lower half of the league and they have been leaking points whenever they run into better athletes or deeper rosters. You see it in that 32-point loss at UCLA. And the night BYU hung 100 on them, those games leave a mark, not just in the box score, but in how a team feels about getting stops when the other side keeps coming. Honestly, if you were designing a road environment for Hawaii to lean into its strengths, it would look a lot like this. A jump shot heavy home team that wants to spread the floor and fire threes, playing in a gym where the crowd can get loud in pockets but does not feel like a true hornet nest. Hawaii can chase shooters off the line. They are holding opponents under 28% from deep, the best mark in the conference, while also leading the Big West in defensive rebounding, which is a brutal combo for any opponent that lives on perimeter rhythm and second chance looks. Layer in the bigger picture, a Hawaii group on a 6-game winning streak, with continuity on the sideline, going up against a first-year Riverside staff trying to plug defensive leaks on the fly, and you start to see why the favorite feels more like the steady grown-up in the room than some fragile road chalk. Yes, it is just their second true road game, with that 10-1 at home, 0-1 away split, and that always introduces some noise, especially on a holiday week trip into California where routine gets a little weird and legs can feel a bit heavy from travel. But if the game settles into what Hawaii prefers, slow physical possessions, clean defensive rotations, a steady parade of contested jumpers on one end and paint touches on the other, then the likely script is the bigger and sharper group gradually leaning on Riverside until the gap on the scoreboard starts to stretch past the number people saw when they opened their betting app. As our first pick for this matchup, the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On the surface, this total looks perfectly reasonable. You pull up season averages and see Hawaii sitting around 80 points per game and UC Riverside around the mid-70s, with the Highlanders allowing something in the high 70s on the defensive end. Anyone just glancing at those numbers can do the quick mental math and think, sure, mid-150s looks like a natural overspot, especially when you remember some of Riverside's recent box scores that turned into track meets with triple-digit numbers hanging over their heads. It plays into a familiar fan instinct too. New Year games, late night window. People love rooting for points, not for missed shots. Let me explain why that first instinct can be a little sneaky here. Hawaii's entire defensive profile is designed to take the air out of a game like this. They treat the three-point line like a restricted zone. They chase shooters off it, then clean the glass behind the initial contest. Conference stats have them at the very top of the Big West in opponent three-point percentage and rebounding margin, which basically means opponents get one decent look and then it is, thanks very much, now go try to score on us again. They are also not looking to sprint for 40 minutes. Their tempo sits right around the national middle lane, and when they are comfortable, possessions slow down into a lot of half-court sets, longer trips, and that familiar college hoops rhythm where you can count down the shot clock with the crowd. That is a very different environment from the ones that pushed UC Riverside totals into the stratosphere against power programs that encouraged a faster pace, softer defense, or both. If Hawaii's defensive strengths actually show up the way the numbers suggest, the texture of this game shifts quite a bit. Instead of an end-to-end sprint, you get something closer to a grind. Riverside's three-point looks go from clean catch and shoot chances to hurried, off-balance attempts. Their second chance buckets become rarer because the board is being won by the visitors, who are already one of the best rebounding outfits in the league. In that kind of game, the winning box score stops looking like 86-80 and starts looking more like 76-65. Still competitive, still watchable, but with fewer total possessions feeding that big number sitting in the sportsbook. There is also a small but important pattern here. Despite their scoring punch, Hawaii games have been leaning toward lower outcomes, with a run of recent contests finishing under their posted totals, especially when they are in the favorite role, which hints that the market keeps nudging the numbers up while their defense keeps dragging games back toward something more modest. So even though UC Riverside has been part of some wild high-scoring affairs lately, the way these particular styles intersect, defense-heavy visitor, three happy hosts suddenly seeing far better perimeter resistance, suggests we are more likely watching a controlled New Year's grind than a fireworks show on the scoreboard. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Indiana State versus Northern Iowa. New Year's night in Cedar Falls always feels a little different, and this one has that classic Missouri Valley edge to it already baked in. You have a Northern Iowa group that wants every possession to feel like pulling teeth, and an Indiana State team that would much rather treat this like an open gym with a scoreboard. The spread sitting in double digits quietly asks one question: can the Panthers not just win at home, but squeeze this thing tight enough that the Sycamores spend 40 minutes trying to breathe through a straw? Here is the thing. Northern Iowa plays like a team that hates wasted motion. They walk the ball up, call their stuff, and make you guard for most of the shot clock. Not because they cannot play faster, but because every extra pass is another chance for you to screw up, not them. The defense is the headline, and it is not just good for the Valley. Opponents are stuck living in the 50s and low 60s because the Panthers close out on the three-point line, wall off the paint, and refuse to foul just to bail you out of a bad possession. You get very few clean threes, even fewer easy drives, and almost no second chances because they are happy to concede the offensive glass on their own end if it means having their defensive shell set every single trip back. That style pairs a slow heartbeat with a high floor. At McLeod, it is even more exaggerated. The building is not gigantic by high major standards, but it is steep, loud, and filled with people who know when to stand up and when to hold their breath. Northern Iowa has spent this season turning that place into a kind of pressure cooker, stacking straight wins, dragging visiting offenses into ugly stretches where the rim suddenly feels 2 sizes smaller. Even when they have not covered in this price range, you can see the blueprint. Stay connected defensively, keep the pace below what the opponent likes, and trust that a couple of small second-half runs can stretch a modest lead into something more uncomfortable. Indiana State walks into that kind of environment with a very different personality. They want rhythm, not wrestling matches. They are comfortable shooting early threes, hunting semi-transition, and letting a little chaos help them. On a normal night, that fun, fast style can catch a lot of mid-tier defenses napping, especially when those threes drop in bunches. The problem is that Northern Iowa is almost built to punish that exact approach. Quick jumpers against an elite set defense usually mean long rebounds that immediately die in the Panthers' hands, followed by another slow, deliberate half-court possession the other way. You can feel the cumulative effect, especially on the road. What starts as we will shoot our way into this often turns into why are we still stuck at 49 points. From a spread perspective, you also have that neat little contrast between resume and matchup. Northern Iowa has not been an automatic cover as a double-digit favorite this season, which keeps this line from feeling too easy or too cute. Indiana State has covered a healthy share of numbers, especially away from home, and that history will tempt anyone who likes grabbing the points with a road dog that can shoot. But here is where style matters more than those trend lines. When you are facing a defense this disciplined, in a gym where they are comfortable, and you are leaning so hard on jump shooting to hang around, every dry spell can snowball into a sudden 14-point hill. It only takes one segment where the Sycamores miss a handful of shots, turn it over once or twice, and give up a couple of threes or back cuts for that spread to start feeling much larger on the floor than it did on the odds screen. So while there is respect for how feisty Indiana State has been for better so far, this particular script plays right into what Northern Iowa wants a January home game to look like. Slow tempo, half-court execution, a crowd that gets louder as the gaps widen, not just when somebody dunks. In that kind of grind, one side has more ways to create margin, especially late when the trailing team has to foul and chase the game instead of simply trading baskets. As our first pick for this matchup, the Northern Iowa Panthers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On the surface, if you just glance at what these teams do in a vacuum, this total feels a bit light. Indiana State can live in the high 70s. Northern Iowa is not some rock fight on a fence every night, and if you lazily add their average outputs, you land closer to a mid-140s result than something that looks like an old-school Valley grinder. So why has the market dragged this down into such a tight scoring band? The short answer is that Northern Iowa keeps dragging people into rock fights anyway. Their tempo is one of the slowest in the country, which is another way of saying there are simply fewer trips up and down the floor than you are used to when you watch a random national TV game. Fewer possessions means each one matters more, and each wasted trip hurts an over more than it hurts an under. They do not chase offensive rebounds in a wild way. They do not turn the ball over a lot. And they are not trying to turn games into track meets with pressure. They are trying to turn games into chess, move by move, where you look up 8 minutes into the second half and the combined scores are still sitting in the 50s. Here is where Indiana State's profile becomes interesting for the total. They lean into pace and shot volume from the perimeter, which can be a blessing or a curse when you are facing an elite three-point defense. If the threes are dropping early, you can absolutely blow an under out of the water before anyone has time to adjust. But when you are dealing with a team that is among the very best nationally at running shooters off the line and contesting catch and shoot looks, those same shots turn into empty trips that also feed Northern Iowa exactly what it wants, which is control of tempo. Instead of both sides trading buckets, you get one team grinding out long possessions and the other failing to cash in on the few clean looks it gets. There is also the free throw angle, and it is not a small thing for a total this tight. Overs in college basketball love late-game foul parades, especially in spreads that sit around 2 or 3 possessions, because every whistle with under a minute left can tack on 2 easy points. Here, you have an Indiana State squad that is more decent than elite from the stripe and a Northern Iowa team that lives in that mid-60% neighborhood, which is the kind of range that keeps a lot of overs 1 or 2 possessions away from cashing. If those fouls come and you are still sweating the number, you are relying on groups that do not exactly strike fear into the heart of the rim in crunch time. Recent form also tilts the mood of this total strongly in one direction. Northern Iowa has been living in Underland for a while, home and away alike, with low-scoring wins and losses piling up where the rhythm of the game never quite breaks open into the free-flowing shootouts that numbers in the 130s would suggest. When they are at McLeod, that tendency gets even more exaggerated, with opponents often staring at the scoreboard in the middle of the second half wondering how their season averages suddenly disappeared. Indiana State, for its part, has seen its own road total skew lower when it leaves the comfort of home, especially against teams that can cut off the easy stuff and force them to rely on jumpers. Put that together with the specific head-to-head history in this building, where these two have already stacked a cluster of unders in recent meetings, and the picture that emerges is not exactly one of a free-scoring New Year's party. So if you sketch out the most realistic script, you get something like this. Northern Iowa drags the pace into mud. The Sycamores have stretches where they cannot quite solve the half-court puzzle, and while there will be a couple of scoring bursts, they are short and choppy rather than sustained track meets. Even if the spread drama late pushes Indiana State into foul mode, you still need both teams to beat their usual efficiency marks from the line and the arc for a full game over to feel comfortable. That can happen, sure, but given how both teams have actually played this season, it feels like you are betting against the grain rather than with it if you expect this one to suddenly turn into a 90-possession shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. UC San Diego versus Cal Poly. New Year's night in San Luis Obispo, small gym, loud band, and you have one team walking in like a well-tuned machine and the other trying to stop the bleeding. UC San Diego shows up sitting at 11-2 overall and 1-0 in league play. Already owning wins in every kind of setting you can ask for, home, neutral, and true road games included. Cal Poly is sitting at 5-9 and 1-1 in the Big West, and the recent form tells you plenty, 4 straight losses and a home record of 2-3 that looks more fragile than frightening. So before you even peek at the numbers, the vibe is pretty clear. One side trusts who it is, the other is still trying to talk itself into it. Here is the thing, UC San Diego's identity did not vanish when the coaching staff flipped over, it just changed clothes. Last season they were a 30-5 monster that mixed top-tier scoring with the best scoring defense in the conference, and this year they are right back to scoring around 82.8 a night while holding opponents near 70.5. That is not smoke and mirrors, that is a team that gets good shots, makes enough of them, and then spends the rest of the evening bothering the life out of you on the other end. On the road, they have already proven they can carry that over. 3 wins out of 4 true road games and a perfect neutral record say the style is portable, not just a La Jolla comfort thing. Cal Poly, on the other hand, feels like the team your betting buddy keeps talking himself into because they look fun on a scoreboard. They put up about 82.7 points a game, which sounds great until you notice they are allowing roughly 87.4 and every night turns into one long stress test. They just dropped an overtime heartbreaker to Idaho, got lit up at UCLA, and have made a habit of playing entertaining losses instead of controlled wins, which is great for neutrals and rough on anyone who cares about margins. The home crowd at Mott Athletic Center will absolutely bring some juice, but 2-3 at home is not exactly a fortress record. It is more like a polite warning label on the ticket stub. If you roll the tape back to last season league-wide, the story really has not changed that much. Cal Poly sat at the very top of the Big West in scoring offense and at the very bottom in scoring defense, while UC San Diego lived near the top on offense and owned the stingiest defense in the conference. So when you match them up, it is the classic matchup of structured, disciplined team against the one that wants to trade haymakers and figure things out later. That usually looks fun for a half, then the more stable side starts turning stops into a slow squeeze on the scoreboard. Now put all that next to the number we actually get, books hanging UC San Diego as a decent-sized road favorite, and it starts to feel less like disrespect to Cal Poly and more like a quiet compliment to how grown up the Tritons are already. You have a team that can score without needing chaos, that has shown it can manage late-game possessions, and that has already handled this opponent comfortably in recent seasons when asked to win by margin. Across 40 minutes, especially if whistles stack up and depth matters, the side that defends better and travels better is the side you expect to stretch a one-possession lead into something more serious. As our first pick for this matchup, the UC San Diego Tritons to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. We are staring at a total parked right around the 170.5 range, and that is a big ask in this conference. It screams expectation of non-stop pace, hot shooting, and almost no defensive resistance for a full 40. On paper, you can see why someone would think that way. Both offenses are in the low 80s per game, and Cal Poly's defense has been generous enough to make almost any opponent feel like a contender in a three-point contest. But here is the thing, raw scoring averages do not always tell you what the matchup is going to feel like. Cal Poly's numbers are inflated by games like that UCLA shootout where both teams just went full fireworks and the Mustangs still walked away on the wrong end of a 108-87 scoreline. Those games are loud, but they are also a little bit of an illusion when you switch into conference play and face opponents that actually know your sets, your counters, and where you hide defensively. UC San Diego is not going to treat this like a track meet for fun. They are happy to run when it is clean, sure, but their core is still that defensive backbone that kept teams under 62 points a game last season and is again dragging opponents scoring down this year. If you imagine how this game plays out, it looks more like stretches of rhythm broken up by long possessions, defensive adjustments, and a whistle that occasionally slows everything to a walk. New Year's energy is great, but tired legs after a busy December are real, and those last 10 minutes often feature more contested jumpers and half-court grind than the early pace suggests. UC San Diego's defense is built to live in those moments, walling off the paint, forcing extra passes, and quietly shaving a few possessions off the game just by being organized. And while Cal Poly loves to push and shoot, they are also very capable of long empty stretches when the threes stop falling, which is part of why they sit at 5 to 9 instead of something more flattering. You can absolutely get scoring runs here, especially early, but asking both teams to sustain that level long enough to cash a number in the 170s means you are betting on 40 full minutes of chaos with almost no stretches of control. Given UC San Diego's preference for turning games into something more measured and the way conference familiarity usually tugs these matchups down a bit, this total feels more like an aggressive tax on recent fireworks than a realistic midpoint of how the game is most likely to look. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.